The last plane leaves. You stand outside and watch it become smaller, then disappear into a white horizon. And that is when something very strange happens. Your workplace stops being a research station and becomes your entire world. There is no road leading north, no town over the hill, no emergency room 2 blocks away. And depending on where you are in Antarctica and what part of winter has arrived, the next aircraft may not be coming for months. At Concordia Station, deep on the Antarctic plateau, winter crews can experience roughly 9 months of isolation, including around 4 months when the sun does not appear above the horizon. Temperatures can fall toward -80 degrees Celsius. The station sits more than 3 kilometers above sea level, where the thin air adds chronic low oxygen stress to everything else. At the South Pole, the situation is different but equally strange. The Amundsen-Scott Station sits at about 2,135 meters elevation, with an annual average temperature around -49 degrees Celsius, and winter temperatures capable of dropping below -80. The pole experiences roughly 6 months of daylight followed by roughly 6 months of darkness, and normal flight operations stop during the winter isolation period. So imagine the implications. If the generator stops, you cannot call the electric company. If a water pipe freezes, you cannot call a plumber. If someone gets sick, there may be no hospital to send them to. If the building catches fire, you cannot simply stand outside and wait for the fire department, because outside is Antarctica. And that reveals the first thing people misunderstand about surviving an Antarctic winter. The cold is not the problem. Well, the cold is definitely a problem. But the real problem is that Antarctica removes nearly every invisible system modern humans normally depend on. Heat, water, power, food delivery, medical backup, transportation, emergency services, daylight, social variety. A winter research station survives only because a tiny group of humans builds an artificial bubble of civilization and then keeps that bubble running for months without permission to fail. An Antarctic station may look like a laboratory. Operationally, it behaves much more like a tiny town. There are sleeping quarters, kitchens, workshops, laboratories, medical facilities, communication systems, power generation, water production, sewage treatment, vehicle maintenance, food storage. The difference is that your town may contain only a few dozen people, and there is nobody living in the next town, which creates a fascinating staffing problem. In a normal city, thousands of specialized people maintain the systems around you. At an isolated Antarctic station, your electrician may also be part of the fire team. Your scientist may help clean the kitchen, your mechanic may have emergency responsibilities, and the doctor may discover that being a doctor is only one of several jobs. At some stations, one doctor may spend the winter caring for the entire community while also taking part in ordinary station duties. At Concordia, the winter skeleton crew needs people such as a technical manager, chef, doctor, communications technician, plumber, mechanic, and electrician just to keep the station functioning safely, which means that during winter, the person repairing the heater is not merely repairing the heater. They are maintaining habitat. The plumber is maintaining habitat. The electrician is maintaining habitat. The cook is maintaining morale. And suddenly the glamorous image of Antarctic exploration becomes slightly less glamorous. You imagined heroic scientists drilling ancient ice cores beneath the aurora. And somewhere, behind them is a tired technician wondering why pump number 3 is making that sound again. But pump number 3 matters. Because the first rule of living where humans should not live is simple. Boring systems are what keep you alive. At home, a power outage is annoying. The lights disappear, the refrigerator stops, the Wi-Fi dies, and within 17 seconds, everyone discovers how emotionally dependent they were on a small blinking router. At an Antarctic station, power means something much more serious. Electricity helps run lights, communications, pumps, scientific equipment, workshops, ventilation, and other station systems, but power generation can also be directly connected to heat. Some Antarctic stations use diesel generators and recover waste heat from the engines. Instead of throwing that heat away, they use it to warm water that circulates through station buildings. Separate emergency generators provide backup power if the main system fails. Think about how elegant that is. The machine producing your electricity is also helping prevent the building from becoming a freezer. Even the pipes can require active protection. Some stations use above-ground utility lines, carrying heating water, drinking water, and other services. Those pipes may need electrical heating just to stop the contents from freezing. So in Antarctica, sometimes, the pipe needs a heater so the heater can keep heating the building. And that is why redundancy becomes almost a philosophy. Main generator, backup generator, monitoring systems, alarms, emergency procedures, spare components. Because the station cannot assume that equipment will never break. It assumes equipment will eventually break, and tries to make sure one broken machine cannot become one frozen community. There is something almost backwards about Antarctic engineering. The goal isn't to build a machine that never fails. The goal is to build a system where failure does not immediately matter. Now we arrive at one of Antarctica's better jokes. You are living on an enormous continent covered in ice, and fresh water is precious. Because ice is not useful drinking water until you spend energy turning it into liquid water, processing it when necessary, storing it, moving it, and preventing it from freezing again. Different stations solve this differently. Some use melt lakes, others melt snow or ice. Some use reverse osmosis and large storage systems. But almost everywhere, water has an energy cost. So the landscape outside can contain more frozen water than you could consume in 1,000 lifetimes, while the person inside is still telling you not to waste water in the shower. Antarctica has successfully turned hydration into an engineering problem, and it gets better. Water is not only for drinking, cooking, and washing. Stations may need it for laboratories, machinery, and firefighting, which means your stored water can be both everyday resource and emergency infrastructure. Every shower has a supply chain. Every cup of coffee has a power cost. Every toilet flush eventually involves another system someone has to maintain. When you understand that, a research station stops looking like a building. It starts looking like a living organism. Fuel becomes metabolism. Generators become a heart. Pipes become blood vessels. Sensors become nerves. Technicians become the immune system. And everyone is hoping the appendix behaves itself. Food creates another beautifully ordinary Antarctic problem. Everybody still gets hungry. The difference is that there may not be a grocery delivery coming next Tuesday. Stations prepare supplies around long resupply cycles. Large amounts of frozen, canned, and dried food are stored for extended periods. Fresh produce becomes limited as the season progresses, and some stations use hydroponic systems to supplement stored supplies. And psychologically, fresh food becomes weirdly powerful. Imagine living for months surrounded by white ice, steel walls, and frozen food. Then somebody arrives carrying a tomato. Normally, a tomato is a vegetable you forget, exists in the bottom drawer of the refrigerator. In Antarctica, that tomato can become an event. Food also helps divide one identical day from another. Birthdays matter. Special dinners matter. Traditions matter. Midwinter celebrations matter. Because when the outside world gives you almost no indication that today should feel different from yesterday, humans manufacture difference. You cook something special, you decorate something, you invent an event, you argue over a movie. Civilization, apparently, is partially the ability to create holidays when the sun has stopped participating. Then there is fire. Cold feels like the obvious Antarctic danger, but inside a station, fire can be terrifying. The environment is extremely dry. The station is isolated. Alternative shelter can be limited. And if a major building becomes unusable during winter, the outside environment is not exactly a comfortable waiting room. So crews conduct regular drills, they maintain firefighting equipment, emergency clothing, tents, and food may be stored away from primary facilities. And wintering expeditioners can receive firefighting training because the crew itself may have to become the fire department. This is one of those situations where the logic becomes absurd, only because the environment is absurd. If your building catches fire in a normal city, you evacuate the building. If your building catches fire in Antarctica, the environment outside may also be trying to kill you, and firefighting itself is harder. Water hoses can freeze in extreme outdoor temperatures. Equipment has to work in conditions where normal assumptions stop being reliable. So imagine the job application: scientist, mechanic, electrician, communications specialist, chef. Also, congratulations. You may now be responsible for preventing everyone you live with from freezing while fighting a building fire at the bottom of the planet. And this reveals another hidden rule of Antarctic survival. You do not prepare only for normal operations. You prepare for what happens when normal operations disappear. If you're enjoying this kind of story, how humans build ordinary life in places where ordinary life should be impossible. Subscribe, because this entire channel is about exactly that. Now things become more uncomfortable. Suppose someone becomes seriously ill. Some Antarctic stations operate medical facilities with only one doctor during winter. That doctor may receive remote support from specialists thousands of kilometers away, while other crew members receive additional first aid training so they can assist if necessary. The obvious solution to a severe medical emergency would normally be evacuation. Except Antarctica can make the word normally useless. Winter weather, darkness, distance and aircraft limitations can make evacuation extremely difficult, or in some locations and periods, effectively unavailable. At places such as Concordia, there can be long stretches when outside rescue simply cannot be assumed. This changes medicine before anybody even gets sick. People are medically screened before deployment. Doctors receive preparation for remote conditions. Crew members receive emergency training. Medical facilities need to handle situations that would normally be transferred rapidly elsewhere, because the station is not beside the healthcare system. For a while, the station is the healthcare system. And being the only doctor creates a bizarre social problem. Your patients are also your roommates, your co-workers, the people eating breakfast beside you. The person you disagreed with yesterday might need your help tonight. There is nowhere to disappear. No anonymous commute home. No different group of friends waiting across town. Which brings us to the part of Antarctica that no amount of insulation can completely solve. The human brain. Near the poles, daylight stops behaving like the daylight your body evolved with. At the geographic South Pole, the year contains essentially one long day and one long night. At Concordia, crews experience months of complete winter darkness. Other Antarctic stations have their own extreme seasonal light cycles depending on latitude. That matters because humans use light to help regulate circadian rhythms. Remove ordinary daylight cues and sleep can become strange. Researchers studying Antarctic winter, crews have examined changes in sleep, alertness, mood, and cognitive performance. Bright light exposure has even been used to help regulate circadian timing during the polar winter. Places such as Concordia are studied partly because the combination of isolation, darkness, confined living, and disturbed day-night cues resembles some challenges expected during long-duration spaceflight, which sounds very scientific. But from the person living there, the problem can be much simpler. You wake up, it is dark. You work, it is dark. You eat dinner, still dark. You go to sleep. And when you wake up tomorrow, Antarctica has cleverly prepared a surprise. It is dark. So routine becomes artificial sunlight for the mind. Breakfast means morning. Work means day. Dinner means evening. Movie night means Friday. Birthday cake means time is still moving. You stop letting the sky tell you what time it is, because the sky has resigned. Then there is isolation. And isolation does something interesting. It makes small things enormous. People who have wintered in Antarctica have described how tiny annoyances can become disproportionately irritating when the same people share the same space for months. Something as trivial as crumbs around a toaster can become surprisingly important. That sounds funny? It is funny, until you realize why it happens. Normally, if a coworker annoys you, you go home, you see different people, you walk through a different neighborhood, you hear traffic, you visit family, you enter a restaurant full of strangers. Your social world resets. In an Antarctic winter crew, the person who annoyed you at breakfast may be sitting across from you at lunch, and dinner, and tomorrow's breakfast, and next month's midwinter party. You cannot create more humans. The supply department forgot to order those. So crews create structure, exercise, games, movies, celebrations, shared meals, creative projects. At some stations, Antarctic crews even make films and organize competitions during winter, and suddenly recreation stops being trivial. A movie room is psychological infrastructure. A gym is psychological infrastructure. A birthday dinner is psychological infrastructure. A ridiculous costume party may be psychological infrastructure. Because surviving Antarctica does not only mean keeping the room warm, it means keeping 20 people willing to live in the warm room together. And while the crew is maintaining themselves, they still have jobs. Scientists are collecting data. Meteorological instruments need attention. Vehicles require maintenance. Generators need servicing. Buildings need inspection. Communications must work. Food must be prepared. Snow accumulates. Equipment breaks. Experiments continue. Some scientific observations are especially valuable during winter because the conditions cannot exist during the brighter, busier summer season, so the station never really settles down. It simply changes modes. Summer is movement, aircraft, ships, cargo, scientists, construction, visitors, resupply. Then the last departure happens. The population collapses, and winter turns the station inward. The outside supply chain disappears. The internal systems become everything. And this gives winter crews a strange relationship with maintenance. Fixing a door is no longer just fixing a door. Maintaining a generator is not merely keeping the lights on. Preparing dinner isn't merely cooking. Every ordinary task is one small vote for the station continuing to exist tomorrow. You might think the solution is simply more engineering. Make thicker walls, install bigger generators, add more backups, automate everything. And Antarctic programs absolutely do use redundancy, monitoring, insulation, and increasingly sophisticated control systems. But there is a limit. Every additional machine also becomes another machine that can break. Every spare part has to arrive somehow. Every liter of fuel has to be transported. Every kilogram of food has a logistics cost. Every building needs maintenance. And eventually, someone still has to be there when a sensor says something is wrong. This is why Antarctic survival is not really about defeating nature with technology. It is about managing dependency. You depend on the generator. So you maintain the generator. You depend on water. So you store it and monitor it. You depend on heat. So you recover waste heat, protect pipes, and keep backup systems. You depend on your team. So you create routines and traditions that stop 17 tiny annoyances from turning into 17 large ones. You depend on medicine. So you screen people, train them, and prepare local medical capability. You depend on rescue. And when rescue cannot be assumed, you become much more careful about needing it. The whole system is basically one enormous exercise in asking, what happens if this fails? And then asking it again, and again, and again, until the answer is no longer. Everybody freezes. Eventually, something appears on the horizon that has not appeared for months. Not an aircraft. The sun. For people who have spent months in darkness, the first returning sunlight can become a major emotional event. People go outside to watch it. They take photographs. They celebrate. Because after months without a sunrise, something the rest of us barely notice becomes extraordinary. And later comes another strange event. A plane. The return of aircraft marks the end of the long isolation period. Crews prepare infrastructure, service equipment, and get the station ready for a much larger summer population. The first arrivals may bring something even more exciting than new people. Fresh food. Imagine spending months with the same tiny group, then suddenly hearing an aircraft. A door opens. Strangers walk in. There are new voices, new faces, new stories, and fruit. It sounds like liberation, except even that can feel weird. After a long period living with the same small crew, suddenly being surrounded by many new people can take adjustment. Because while the rest of the world continued changing, your world became a few people, a few buildings, and an infinite amount of ice. Then civilization suddenly walks back through the door. And this is where Antarctica changes. From a distance, surviving there looks like a story about clothing. Huge jackets, insulated boots, goggles, gloves. And yes, obviously, wear the gloves. But the clothing is only the outermost layer. The real survival system is much larger. Generators producing electricity, waste heat warming buildings, pipes protected from freezing, water manufactured, stored and conserved, food calculated months in advance, medical care moved inside the station, firefighters created from the people already there, backup systems waiting behind primary systems, routines replacing daylight, celebrations replacing seasons, friendships replacing social variety, and a tiny group of people doing enough different jobs to simulate something that resembles a functioning town. That is the trick. Humans did not evolve to survive an Antarctic winter. We cannot stand outside at -70 degrees, and simply decide to become better at being mammals. We survive by placing layers of engineering, planning, and cooperation between our biology and Antarctica. In some ways, an Antarctic winter station is less like a building, and more like a spacecraft that forgot to leave Earth. The comparison is surprisingly appropriate. Researchers use Antarctic stations to study some of the same psychological and physiological challenges expected during long-duration space missions: isolation, confinement, artificial routines, restricted rescue, small crews, limited resources, a hostile world beyond the walls. The landscape outside does not care whether the kitchen is warm. It does not care whether the doctor has enough supplies. It does not care whether two crew members are tired of each other. It does not care whether the generator starts tomorrow morning. Antarctica never becomes comfortable. The station becomes comfortable despite Antarctica. And maybe that is the most impressive part. Not that humans learn to tolerate impossible cold. Machines can tolerate cold. Not that humans reach the bottom of the world. Aircraft can reach it. Not even that scientists can work there. The strange achievement is that we learn to transport the basic ingredients of normal human life into a place that provides almost none of them. Then keep those ingredients alive for months. Heat, water, food, medicine, electricity, routine, community. You build a tiny artificial world. You close the door. The last plane disappears. And for the next several months, you become responsible for keeping your world alive.